rejoin the session. And if there are any other issues, kindly put up that message in the chat box. One more request, kindly keep your questions relevant to the topic that is being discussed in the sessions. At the end, we will also take up all the Q&A, question and answers, questions from you, comments from you. So please keep engaging with us through chat box also.
Yeah, okay, Dr. Swati, we are live now. You're good to go. And yeah, over to you.
Sure. So welcome again, the dear speakers, team from Taylor and Francis, and our most respected learners who are always showing the spirit of learning through our sessions. We'll start with a short introduction of Pharma State Academy, what we do, and then we'll move to the session. Thank you so much, Satish. And now let us start with the session. You all know that we keep bringing new topics for you to learn. You give us feedbacks, we act on it, and we bring you more sessions. So this time, Taylor and Francis group has joined us to bring further learning opportunities for you. Well, this is the first session in a series of 3 sessions that we are holding in collaboration with Taylor and Francis Group. And we are focusing on engaging the HCPs digitally. As we see, a lot of engagement is happening with the HCPs or doctors in the digital space, marketing managers, medical teams, they all have tried to devise few strategies in the digital mode. They're implementing also. So this session is going to, increase the armamentarium that your teams have already in the digital engagement for HCPs. Well, today's speakers, the speakers with us are Mr. Salil Kalyan. Most of us know him, our digital brand coach, our digital guru, a lot of knowledge he has shared with us through various platforms, including ours. And also we have with us Dr. Karthik, Chief Operating Officer at Roche Pharma. So welcome, Dr. Karthik, and welcome, Salil sir. And from Taylor and Francis Group team, we have Sonali Bhardwaj, Senior Marketing Manager, and Pushkar, who is in the marketing team, Marketing Business Manager. Welcome, Pushkar. Welcome, Sonali. This is a 1-hour session, so I'll not take much of the time just introducing things. I'll hand over the session to Ms. Sonali, who would be moderating the session with our 2 esteemed speakers. Sonali, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Swati. That's a wonderful introduction. And good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us today. Let me begin by giving you some background about Taylor and Francis Group. Taylor and Francis Group is wholly owned by Pharma Global PLC, who is the world's largest knowledge provider through their 60+ companies based in Switzerland. Pharma has 150 offices across the world with over 70,000 employees in 40 countries. TNF forms the biggest business of the Pharma company. We started our journey in 1798, and we have a 222-year-old strong legacy of bringing cutting-edge research to your doorstep. We partner with researchers, scholarly societies, universities, libraries, and institutions to bring knowledge to life. As one of the leading publishers of scholarly journals, ebooks, books, and reference works, our work spans all areas of humanities, social science, behavioral science, science, technology, and medicine. We publish more than 2,400 journals and over 5,000 new books each year, with a books backlist in excess of 120,000 specialist titles. We are pleased to bring a series of webinars engaging HCPs digitally and beyond, for empowering pharma marketing and medical teams. These sessions will help you to connect effectively with the healthcare professionals, that is HCPs, through newer digital approaches and strategies for building the long-term relationship. Before we begin, let me introduce you to the speakers of the day. Our first speaker is Mr. Salil Kalyan. Salil has 27 years of commercial leadership experience across India, emerging markets, and Europe. Until August 2017, he was an executive member of the Global Established Products Learning Team at GSK and member of the board of directors for 𝐊𝐚𝐴𝐚𝐬𝐿 Asia Private Limited. Since September 2017, Salil is marketing strategy and digital business transformation advisor and mentor to companies, leveraging his extensive experience in the pharmaceutical industry in companies like Dr. Reddy's, Pfizer, and GSK. Salil is a valued external speaker and industry thought leader in the pharma industry. He's a sector expert on business TV channels and visiting faculty at NMIMS, a top 10 business school in India. He's well networked across the industry in India and a very interested health policy observer. Our second speaker of the day is Dr. Karthik Anantharaman. Dr. Karthik is the Chief Operating Officer of Karnataka State Cluster with the Roche Pharma, an innovation-led by biopharmaceutical company. He was previously the Director of e-pharmacy and private label business at MedLife, India's largest e-health platform. Karthik is a trained medical doctor with a degree in internal medicine and surgery, MBBS from Bangalore University, a postgraduate MBA in marketing from Manipal University, and a super specialization MBA GELP from Yale School of Management, Yale University, Connecticut, USA. Karthik is the recipient of 30 top influencer in Indian healthcare industry, Jan 2020, most influential marketing leaders listing by World Marketing Congress twice in a row, in November 2015 and in November 2016. Leading industry awards from Frost & Sullivan, Economic Times, Best Healthcare Brands and Brand Trust Award 2016. He was earlier the head of business unit at Biocon Limited, an innovation-driven global biotechnology company. He was earlier the chief marketing officer of BPL Medical Technologies and Penlon Limited, Goldman Sachs portfolio company. He has also led marketing for GE Healthcare for molecular imaging and computed tomography business and has held senior managerial positions with leading pharmaceutical organizations like AstraZeneca and MSD. Karthik was one of the core team members responsible for the launch of South Asia's first patented primary care health pharmaceutical brand, Januvia, which later went on to become the largest pharmaceutical launch of South Asia in 2008. Karthik has also had a stint as an entrepreneur, launching one of India's first chronic disease management companies in 2010-11. It's so great to have you, sir, here, and both our speakers, and thank you for joining us. And without further ado, I will hand over to our speaker, Mr. Salil, over to you.
Thank you, Sonali. Thank you very much for your warm introduction, and thank you, Pharma State and Taylor and Francis for putting this up. This is a very important topic and something that I will spend not. I mean, we can speak for hours together, but keeping the paucity of time in mind, we will discuss some points which can probably lead to some questions from the audience, which we will be then happy to take under your moderation. So thank you once again. Today I'm going to be talking about the emerging trends in health information as part of my conversation or the points that I'd like to share with you, essentially dealing on three topics. One is the information overload that the internet has created, which leads to the flip side of the coin, which is fake news, and what is pharma's role in managing that. And then a good way to overcome this fake news is to allow or encourage self-publishing. So those are three things that I want to talk about. Let's start by talking about the ground harsh reality, right? And this is we all from the pharma industry are very familiar with this, that clinicians don't really have much time to engage in clinic. And if you look at the way that doctors are surrounded by patients and have absolutely no time to read, to update themselves, or to have very interesting discussions with pharma in the inside the clinic. And a survey that we did with about 1,000 doctors last year in 2020 was, it gave some very interesting insights about how much time a doctor would typically spend in a day talking to pharmaceutical representatives. And so there, what you also see is that pharma thinks of itself as the harbinger of information, but unfortunately what happens is that doctors have to spend a lot of other time reading correspondence, reviewing medical articles and journals, and consulting with other healthcare practitioners, which goes to say that, the time that they spend with the industry is a little short of expectations, or what we think that they should be doing. Now, to complicate that issue, what is happening in the internet-led world, and as the world went more digital post the COVID pandemic, networks started to get created, and networks started to get interconnected between different stakeholders in the healthcare sector. And so today, doctors do not have to just keep abreast of medical literature, but they also have to be on social media. They also have to keep in touch with the intranet. They have to keep in touch with their professional networks. They have to be in touch with the hospitals that they work with. They have to be in touch with government policy, health policy, what the media says about them. They have to talk about, think about advocacy organizations, patients, etc. So they get hammered from almost every end. And that sort of leads to a tremendous amount of information overload. And that kind of an information overload is sometimes very difficult, keeping the doctor's extremely busy schedule in mind. And so therefore, what happens because of this is that the information overload has a definite problem, which is basically fake news. And we all know that in the past, large organizations, $2 trillion organizations like Facebook have actually faced, or Metaverse, Meta, or as it is called today, Meta platforms, has got this as its biggest problem. And all the media companies or the content controlling companies have this as a major problem, which is basically unverified or fake news. And unfortunately, what happens is this fake news doesn't come from your WhatsApp groups or WhatsApp universities, as they're derisively called, but they also they publish in mainstream media. We've had lots of such cases with the New York Times. We've had lots of cases with Republic, with mainstream media channels like NDTV or India Today or any of these things. The Washington Post, New York Times, mainstream media across the world has been pulled down because of fake news. President Trump, not the best example here, but then President Trump went hammer and tongs after a lot of US media, calling them fake and biased. So the point is that these news organizations have to call out fake news and disinformation without legitimizing them. Now, is that something that we can leave to them? If pharma is essentially the gatekeeper to information, if pharma is a harbinger of information and is thinking of this as its major reason for existence, and it's in its interaction with healthcare professionals, then I think this is as much a problem for pharma to manage, or this is an opportunity. In my opinion, this is an opportunity for pharma to be the gatekeeper of credibility, to be the kind of the onbringer of authentic information, become a sort of a rubber stamp, or become a sort of a credibility agency where you can build a massive competitive advantage by ensuring that the information that is provided to your customers through you becomes credible, authentic, and takes care of fake news. Filters out the fake news, verifies it, and ensures that the news that goes to the doctors or to the any other stakeholder is authentic and credible. Now, one of the reasons that fake news has become such a big problem led the US FDA, or we're seeing regulators around the world increasingly thinking about real world evidence and admitting it as evidence. Right? So if you see, nowhere am I trying to say that randomized clinical trials are not important or that they are less authentic, but what you're seeing is an increasing reliance on real world data. And this is very different from the past, where traditional RCTs used to be, or randomized clinical trials used to be, the mainstay of information. But going forward, the reliance on real world evidence is increasing, and this is because very strong clinical journals like JAMA, the BMJ, Lancet, etc. have all been accused of printing unauthenticated, I won't say fake news, but trials or clinical data which was not either thoroughly peer reviewed, or which turned out to be unauthentic. So if regulators around the world have started to look at this, so one is that information overload happens because of the digitalization of information, and because of Web 2.0, which essentially allows people to publish on their own. On the other hand, regulators are struggling to deal with this. So I think pharma has a very strong role to play in the kind of medication, or in the kind of information that gets published over there. So real world evidence, if you see, has therefore become a very important feature of the new normal. Now, in the new normal, regulatory policies we saw were easing. Real world evidence was becoming very serious, and digital outreach was therefore improving. And so a vaccine that essentially would have taken 10 to 12 years came out in 10 months. Right? And never before has drug discovery been accelerated at this pace. This is exponential. This is not incremental, this is exponential, and this is something that is probably the new normal. Now, apart from the emergency use authorization, bringing the product to the market with this kind of technology platforms, this is, and the use of data like this, published data which is not coming from these authentic platforms, or which were earlier the gateways of these platform of this information, is, I think, an important development that has happened in the world. Now, how is the world reacting therefore to all of this? Right. So on one hand, there is a large amount of information. On the other hand, you cannot tell authentic news away from fake news. So that this is bringing to the fore the rise of the creator economy. Now, the creator economy is essentially where the intermediaries are no longer holding the power on publishing information. People are now allowed to, or have the authority, not the authority, but they have the ability to publish their own information. Right. So creators of information, they may be videos, they may be, that's why you see so many social media influencers coming up. You see so many credible authorities being created on various topics. For example, for cryptocurrency, you probably won't read the Economic Times, but you will read some of the other influencers like Balaji Srinivasan or somebody else. Similarly, for medicine, over a period of time, maybe doctors are not going to be reading published information from there, but they will trust credible people, their own networks, their own communities, people who they know firsthand. And if you have that sort of an ability to do this, then I think it kind of takes care of fake news. It kind of makes the way that publishing happens, it gives it a completely different light, and it brings to pharma a massive opportunity for allowing or helping their doctors to publish more and create a digital footprint. Right. Now, why is this important for healthcare professionals? Because healthcare professionals are also getting rated by consumers as much as any other service, right? So medical is becoming, or medical services they're now a services industry, so they are paid for service, right? So earlier doctors used to be worshipped. Today they are considered as service providers, or we are increasingly moving towards considering them as service providers. So if you are not happy with one healthcare professional, we'll happily move to another, right? So the loyalty to a professional, the kind of family physician ties that we had is no longer there. Today you don't really care about who you see as long as you get authentic medical advice. So how do you know a good doctor from the bad, or a good doctor from another, or a better doctor from a good doctor? You know this based on user ratings. Just like how you know which TV is better than the other, that's the way that it happens. And if you see that public awareness, perception, and the use of online physician ratings have actually gone up exponentially. And a large number of organizations around the world have now started to do this in more and more regularly, right? The frequency of looking up user ratings for healthcare professionals is increasing. Now, user ratings can happen. So it is, for user ratings to actually go up, it is simply sitting in a hospital or in a clinic and doing your job is one part of it, which is increasingly becoming hygiene. You should of course be good at what you're doing, but you need to make people aware of the fact that you know that you are a thought leader. Or when you start to publish, and that one way in which you can do that is to increase your publishing frequency and your publishing content. The more you publish, the more you become aware that you're a thought leader, the more influencers you create, the more followers you get, the more amounts of user ratings that you have. And so therefore, it's quite important that pharma thinks about helping doctors to increase their publishing very fast. An important understanding of doctor publications or open access doctor publications is that the internet allows it to create impact and reach very, very quickly. So in the earlier days, after a publication of a cited article, it generally would take about 400 to 700 days for citations to reach its peak, which is roughly about 2 years. Today, you can get that same thing done in less than 2 months. Okay? Under 60 days, you start to have the number of citations and tweetations that start to go up. And then, the impact that an article, a publishing or a published article online, on a blog or on a medical channel or on an open access platform or something like that. Now, an open access platform essentially means that it is open to public, right? So it's not behind a paid firewall or something like that, and anybody can kind of read it. It appears on your SEO, it appears on your Google searches and so on and so forth if you have the right keywords. Now, that allows many, many more people to see it, to view it, than a published article in a paid journal. So the way that information is being disseminated has changed dramatically, and I think pharma should be able to take this. Now, apart from that, I think for a doctor, the win is that it helps to build an online personality, an online persona, a brand. Okay, and personal branding, in my opinion, is one of the most important things in the digitized world, because you are not dealing with people who you meet face to face, but a larger part of the society that follows you are people you've never met in your life. And so therefore, I think having a strong online brand is a very important part of business development, and I think pharma should start to look at this. Typically in pharma, the publishing area of medical literature was managed by the medical affairs department or the clinical research department and was not seen as part of the marketing armamentarium. So what I want you to do is to think whether doctor self-publishing can become a marketing goal. And if you think it can, then I'm sure you'll be interested in what the Taylor and Francis group have to say. If you don't think that is true, then I'm happy to take any questions or any thoughts that you have. But I will hand you back to the Taylor and Francis group, and I would urge you to listen to what Dr. Karthik has to say, and then we can take your questions. So thank you very much for your patient listening, and I'll hand you back to the TNF group.
Thank you so much, sir. I think that was pretty insightful. And you have very rightly highlighted the need for HCPs to create the personal brand in the digital world, as it will benefit the HCP community in the longer time. So without taking much time, sir, Dr. Karthik, hand over to you for your valuable talk.
Sure. Thank you, Sonali. And Salil, fantastic, I think, presentation. I can't agree with you more. Personal branding possibly has assumed the highest level of importance now. And as you rightly brought up, this WhatsApp university, there was multiple messages that used to keep floating and continues to float. But there was one aspect, one specific message that I distinctly remember, which came during towards the end of the first phase of the pandemic, and again, the second wave of the pandemic as well. It said, who was the one that actually drove digital transformation in your organization? And it was primarily focused on healthcare professionals and pharma industry, hospitals at large. There were 3 options given in that. Is it your CTO, the Chief Technology Officer? Is it your CEO, Chief Executive Officer, or is it COVID-19? And I think everyone took COVID-19. So I think what the pandemic truly brought to the fore was to make people realize, especially the laggards, if we were to call, the ones who are a little resistant or hesitant to adapt to digital transformation in the way how they work, physicians, pharmaceutical industry, and patients. I think the entire ecosystem, if we were to say, COVID-19 did teach that lesson, that being digitally connected and being digitally known is not an option anymore. It is a must-have requirement. And I think in the pursuit of having that digital footprint, everything that you mentioned, I think creating that digital brand, and the digital brand is primarily driven by content, becomes of paramount importance. So I think you've made a great presentation. So I just would like to possibly just share a few insights I learned from BCG, the Boston Consulting Group. So I have a small presentation courtesy BCG, which I could learn, which was actually shared in one of our market research workshops. And as you can see from what you see on the screen, this talks about the changing expectation of doctors from pharma, and that this expectation is kind of here to stay. So if you actually see how this is moved, in terms of the changing expectation from pharma, so without an exception, although results could vary from city to city, market to market, most physicians now prefer to keep or increase the share of virtual interaction with their pharma companies. As you can see, multiple specialties in medicine have been interviewed as a part of this research, both medical, surgical specialties, etc. And this interview has been conducted across the world, both in evolved economies and in emerging economies, including parts of India as well. So therefore, the clear message that is coming out is that doctors would like to keep a balance between what we typically call phygital engagement, which is a combination of physical and digital engagement. Now, therefore, the preference for virtual engagement, completely driven, I think, as a part of digital transformation through the pandemic, has significantly increased over a period of the last 18 to 20 months. And you can see here how the change has been. This is before the pandemic, this is in the beginning of the pandemic, and this is during the pandemic, and this is once the vaccines have been found. The second wave has come and gone. You can still see that the doctors would prefer to have a combination of physical meets plus knowledge sharing platforms through scheduled webcasts, webinars, video chats, including on-demand video chats. And this is across the specialties. You can see it has been done across medical oncology, cardiology, endocrinology, neurology, dermatology, rheumato, ophthalm, nephro. Primarily, you see most of them show a similar, affinity. But the key thing to understand here is that there has been a significant change in the preference for virtual speaker programs and training webinars. And that would certainly not replace the physical visit by a sales from a medical representative or a pharma professional. There would be a fine balance between the two. But the three important, you can say, aspects that have gained significant traction in the last 12 to 18 months have been virtual speaker webinars, training webinars, and regular scientific webinars, which I'm sure, along with a lot of the publication work that Taylor and Francis Group would do, they are very well entrenched into large-scale webinars and scientific education programs. And Salil made a very good point that, there were multiple avenues available for physicians earlier in terms of gaining knowledge, but unfortunately there was paucity of time. So there was only 8% of the time. I remember the second slide where you showed a pie chart, that only 8% of the time is what they used to allocate to meet with medical representatives. But unfortunately, they saw very little value in what the medical representative brought to the table. So that's why you can see here, the content generally of conversation used to be too generic, sometimes not relevant as well. And again, the physicians had very insufficient time to read. So therefore, the point here is, how can we therefore make meaningful engagements with physicians with the limited time that we have in the chamber or in clinic, as we call. And that can happen through enhancing the quality of content. So there are big gaps between perceived value of content and what the doctors actually receive. And this is typically where we see a significant opportunity. I can share a few examples, which I'd like to do after I complete this presentation. So therefore, what I see here is that the share of virtual patient interactions post-COVID is also expected to be twice as high as compared to the pre-COVID levels. And this is clearly visible, with the use of telemedicine and video-enabled tools, which has grown significantly during the pandemic. And you could also see, if any of you are following some of the digital health platforms like Practo or DocSap or MFine, you can see that pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, there has been 500 to 600% growth in traffic, purely led by the higher willingness of both patients and physicians to kind of connect with each other and over a teleconsultation platform and offer technology-led medical consultations per se. So, and again, the good news is that post the second wave of the pandemic, the patient traffic is back to normal. The OPDs are full across specialties. So, and therefore, now is the real time to really kind of make the best use of what we call as establishing the digital footprint of the doctor, which actually helps both the hospital and the doctor in multiple ways. So at this is the last slide that I had on this presentation. I'd like to possibly share a few examples of what we have been able to practically implement through content and through publications. Early on in the pandemic, so as you know, the organization that I'm currently associated with, we work in specialty care. And in specialty care, referrals constitute a significant chunk of the outpatient traffic that the hospitals generally get. There are both domestic referrals and there are both international referrals that hospitals do get. One of the key challenges that hospitals had during the pandemic is, travel was curtailed. So people that used to come from far off places were no longer coming. And patients that had to come in for cancer infusions every 15 days or every 21 days, typically these are cycles that patients cannot afford to miss. The patients could not travel. So therefore, the hospitals had a specific challenge as to how do I make sure that I meet my patient demand requirements and how do I ensure that I take care of the current patients who are unable to travel. So at that time, there were two things that came to their rescue. One is digital content-led marketing. So a lot of hospitals actually came together, brought their marketing teams together, and they started publishing blogs. They started publishing online content, including YouTube and Facebook related content of the good clinical work that their consultants are doing. And they used it in a B2C fashion to promote it to patients and also to referral doctors, typically surgeons, internal medicine consultants, obstetricians and gynecologists, who are the key consulting specialties that refer cancer patients into cancer hospitals. And this really worked so well that after the second wave of the pandemic, now the hospitals are able to gather back almost to pre-COVID normal in terms of their domestic referrals, and even international referrals have started as well. The second important thing is they started publishing clinical case studies. Now, the one thing that is very important to understand is what is the publication desire of a normal Indian physician. As all of us know, the ultimate in terms of establishing one as a well-published physician is to have multiple publications in key peer-reviewed journals. But getting to a peer-reviewed journal is basically a journey. It is not easy. It takes a certain amount of time, learning, expertise in actually publishing, and also to publish credible and statistically significant clinical work. But if you see, there are very few clinicians who have reached that stage of maturity of actually being able to publish in a peer-reviewed journal. Most physicians have very simple needs. The simple need could be as simple as, hey, I have collected 20 patients' data, interesting data. Can I make a poster presentation out of it? I'm attending this conference. I need a small abstract to be written out of this, which is more like medical writing in very simple words. And I want to publish my abstract or present my abstract in the next clinical conference that I'm attending, either within the country or outside the country. So these are some of the very simple needs that physicians come up with. And one of the key organizational structural change that we have brought in within the organization, and again, I'm taking a cue from what Salil mentioned, the responsibility of what we used to call medical writing, content writing, used to be with the so-called medical affairs department or the R&D department in pharma companies. We have deconstructed that whole head office structure, R&D, medical affairs, etc. We have converted all of the medical scientific functions into customer-facing field functions, and it is working fantastically well for us. So we have physicians in customer-facing roles and in field roles who actually take a lot of passion in engaging customers through very simple publication formats. And I think that's the way to go. That is when you'll be truly able to create customer delight. And the expectation from a regular Indian physician is not really complex at all. So therefore, again, I come back to say that it's a great opportunity that we have in hand in terms of being able to cater to the digital needs of customers with so small publications, blogs or blogs types of content. And the keywords that we use in publishing these poster presentations, abstract presentations, blogs or vlogs with the right keywords go a long way in search engine optimization. And I can share with you a recent example that Google Analytics helps in understanding what is the level of digital footprint a physician or a hospital is able to make. And we've been able to basically measure baseline Google Analytic data of a particular doctor. And over a period of 12 months, we have engaged her through creating a microsite for her, creating blogs for her, publishing some of her clinical case studies. And we have seen a 500x growth in her digital footprint. And that has led to almost a 5 times increase in the referral traffic to her OPD. So this is how we're able to ensure that digital brand building, as we call for doctors and hospitals, are able to translate into tangible outcomes or benefits for the hospital. And at the end of the day, our customers' success is our success. So that is how I really see that creating a digital brand for physicians, for doctors, through content and publication-driven approach is a great way of engaging customers. So once again, I see that Pharma State and Taylor and Francis Group have really chosen a very relevant topic for today. I once again thank them for this opportunity. And again, compliments to Salil, great knowledge, what he brings to the table. So I would like to conclude my talk here, and I hand it over back to Sonali.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karthik. I mean, that was absolutely a wonderful talk wherein you emphasized about how the pharma companies can play a bigger role by supporting their HCPs in creating their personal brand, that too digitally. Absolutely, and I completely agree that post-COVID era, the need of the hour is to connect with these HCPs digitally, but with a different approach, addressing their pain points, such as training about the publishing research or managing data, or formatting manuscript, plagiarism, high rejection rates. I mean, the list is long, but I think but the most important is that, as you have rightly said, with Pharma State and Taylor and Francis has bring this up here because we have that 360-degree solution with us, which can support these HCPs in their publishing needs, and where Pharma can play an important role, because in this 360-degree solution, we provide tailored courses for HCPs to design, to leverage their research output and impact. Also the broad range of editing services, including scientific editing and plagiarism check to increase HCP's chance of publication. Also publish with ease with our new open access digital platform that propels transparent and faster publication and dissemination of research. Having said that, disseminating HCP's research and making an impact by visual using infographics, like Mr. Salil was also mentioning, infographics and videos created by us to make it stand out. That is something also we do. On that terms only, we'll have our another session on the 17th of December, wherein we'll be covering all these points, what we have discussed right now about the pain points, and how we can support it better. And the details of which is available on the page that everybody must have seen. We will also share the information in the email address as well. And I think it's now the time for question and answers, because we have, I think, covered it in good time. So we have a good number of time for the Q&A as well. And I will again request everyone to please type in their questions in the chat box, and we'll bring them up here for our speakers and the panelists to answer. The first question.
Sonali, just before the question, because I was hearing all three of you, Salil said, Dr. Karthik and Sonali, and we have been holding a lot of webinars, listening to a lot of good speakers from pharma. Just one question to Salil sir. Salil sir, mostly we are saying that this all has happened post-COVID. Right, we are more and more emphasizing that COVID has been the change maker in this, but you have been there for long saying that digital engagement with doctors should be one of the marketing strategies with pharma. Right. So few more. I want you to put more emphasis. Why is it required? We are just crediting it to COVID, or what is the need now?
Well, Swati, I think credit must go where credit is due. So I think the most important and the most effective chief digital officer in the world has been COVID. And no one has transformed digital or accelerated an industry's digital journey the way that COVID did. Okay, Pharma would probably have been 5 or 6 years behind if COVID had not happened. Now that said, does it mean that your strategy has changed because of COVID, and so if COVID goes away, you go back to whatever you were doing in the past? No, right? Because apart from the industry, a large part of the macro environment has also changed. The way that consumers behave, the way that consumers interact with our business or with the world around us, right? So digital is no longer something that is like a fad or something new, like a shiny new toy, but it is an integral part of our life. You and I are consumers for other industries and sometimes for our own, and we realize that the kind of convenience that we get because of digital outreach has helped us. So I think the most important thing for us to understand in the pharma strategy is what is it that has devalued my value proposition, or how am I able to reach out to my consumers and customers in a way that I can create value for them, especially in a hyper-generic market like India, where products routinely don't differentiate, right? So you have, like, on an average, maybe 50, 60 brands per category or per molecule. How does one brand differentiate versus the other? And finally, we see that at the end of the day, the differentiator is just the price. And so from that perspective, I think it is important to understand value or look at value creation in a very, very different way. Now, this is where digital helps, because technology offers you options of creating value which you couldn't do through your single channel, which was the field force. Right? So there's tremendous opportunity to create value, but the value will not get created unless we understand what has changed in our customers' life. How have they changed? And unfortunately, I don't see pharma doing too much of research on that front, trying to understand. I'm not saying they're not doing it, but it's not enough. To understand what exactly has changed in the lives of customers and so on. And if you do that, then you will realize what their pain points are, and so therefore digital becomes a very important part of this one. I think from the topic of today, this is where the whole crux lies, right? Why should I be thinking about publishing for a doctor, right? A sales guy or a marketing person sitting on the call must be thinking about that. Why is publishing important for me? It's not my KPI. It's not about your KPI. It's about what can create value for your customer, right? And so therefore, if value creation for your customer includes self-publishing, includes publishing, includes help in understanding all the wonderful things that Sonali just talked about that the TNF platform can offer, then why should it not be built into your KPIs? Right? That's for management to think about. That's for senior leadership to think about. And I think that is why digital is largely called a transformation, because you're doing very different things on digital. You're not going to do the same job again and again. So if you think that I will use digital to give samples, to have webinars and to do iPad detailing, that's basically your offline strategy converted to an online world, which is not going to work. So I think it is important to understand the things that Karthik brought out from the BCG deck and also from his experience, saying that how customers have changed, how are they consuming information, what is the problem with that information, is that information good, or is pharma willing to cede that space like they ceded the whole services space to the digital health industry, right? If we are going to be the harbinger of information, and I think for a long time multinational companies and Indian have differentiated their products entirely on science, on information, on medical literature. So there is an opportunity for you to use that as a very important tool in your marketing armamentarium, and see how publishing or self-publishing or creation of more medical information and literature becomes a very strong competitive advantage for you. So this has got nothing to do with COVID. Whether COVID exists, doesn't exist, whether there is another variant that comes in, or whatever happens, life has largely changed. That's why it's called a new normal, like I put up on one of my slides. It's not the old normal. the importance of certain things are changing because you're bombarded with information from various places. What do I trust? What do I not trust? And if you have credible customers being able to publish their thoughts and all that in an unbiased manner on platforms which are open access, which are available to everybody around, there's a lot to do with COVID. Whether you are doing face-to-face meetings or you are doing digital outreach, this is an important development that you should take advantage of.
Thank you, Salil sir. Same question to you, Dr. Karthik. Like, you have been, your profile is such a strong profile, worked in digital, healthcare industry in digital formats and many different leadership roles. So do you agree that this has nothing to do with COVID, and publishing for the doctor should be supported by the pharma companies?
No, absolutely, Swati. I remember seeing a publication. Again, when I say it's basically a research report, which actually looks at, if you were to look at the annual count of all peer-reviewed publications that happen worldwide in a particular year, Jan to December calendar, if we were to say. I remember, I'm unable to recollect the source of that. I believe it was one of the leading consulting companies who published that. The United States continues to contribute close to around 50 to 60% of all global published peer-reviewed publications still. Europe contributes around the remaining around 20% or so. So between the United States and US and Europe, you have almost the world's 70 to 80% of publications that come in, followed by some of the, and then if you look at India's contribution even today to global literature, and global literature typically is spoken in the context of new evidence generation, an evidence which previously was not known. That contribution from India is still 1% or less than 1%. So the question is, we are a country of 1.3 billion people. We have very talented doctors. So why is our contribution to original research restricted to just that 1% or less than 1%? It goes back to the point that Salil made, that there is intent to publish, but there is no time. Or possibly our doctors don't know how to prioritize their time and balance their time between clinical work and research. So that is one area which our doctors have not been able to balance. Okay. Now, can pharma play that consultative role, or that a knowledge partner, if I were to use that word, to make this doctor published? I think that is going to be an awesome way of engaging the customer, because this is in more ways than one, a career building or a profile building type of a consultative partnership for the doctor. And there are umpteen opportunities to do so. Now, what are the benefits of publishing? Couple of things. Very tangible benefit, if I were to say, if you were to look at all multinational organizations operating in India, pharmaceutical organizations, they always have an SOP called as fair market value, FMV, fair market value SOP, when they pay out honorarium to doctors for clinical engagements that they do. And in this SOP, if you generally see, you have about 7 or 8 parameters based on which you would classify the doctor or score a doctor. One of the key parameters in that FMV strategy is how published is this doctor? How many global publications does he have? How many national publications does he have? That contributes 1 or 2 points to his overall scoring. Higher the scoring, higher is his credibility or ranking as a top tier 1 HCP. And tier 1 HCPs also get the highest of honorarium in most academic and clinical forums that pharmaceutical companies conduct. So see what is the link between being published and being really and also being seen in the eyes of pharmaceutical organizations as a higher ranked healthcare professional. The second important thing is the world looks at you. There are multiple people looking at your digital footprint, as we just discussed a little while ago. And when you reach a certain level of followers for your blogs, when you reach a certain level of unique digital imprints or unique readers, as we call, for your publications, they start receiving a lot of guest speaker invites to international and domestic congresses. This is the other benefit of publishing. So you can see that publishing is not just about setting up digital footprint and possibly creating a brand of oneself, a self-brand or a self-image. It has multiple other facets or benefits that come in globally and from within the country as well. So this is how I see that pharma could really play that critical role of a strategic consultant partner or a knowledge partner in actually not only increasing the contribution of India into global publications in terms of peer-reviewed publications, but also to bring in those career-making or career-changing growth opportunities to doctors at the same time.
Thank you, Dr. Karthik. I couldn't agree more. When we were doing our studies, we had nothing of this sort. We didn't even knew that such sort of publications should be happening from our end. We needed to publish whatever cases we handled. But today, the world is open to digitalization, and pharma companies can surely support the HCPs in getting them published, helping the whole healthcare ecosystem in India to up their game. This is the time to up your game. You can get a doctors published, more research, and create India as a research hub.
I actually, in fact, completely agree, because, like Mr. Salil was saying, that it's important to have that value proposition first. And like I said, it's good to see what how HCPs can be approached differently. The second is, I agree with Dr. Karthik on what the India contribution to the global literature is less than 1%, because if we see the amount of patients our doctors see, it's actually huge. But the study or the research that is coming out, it's not even it's not even like, I can't even have it in the percentage because it's not coming out. So it's actually important to the contribution to the literature is also important at the same time. I actually agree with that. And I think with that, we have a few minutes left, but I'll still take on few questions for everyone.
Sure, Sonali, over to you. Please take up these
Sure.
questions.
Yes. So the first question is, what percentage weightage you will give to digital touch point versus face-to-face to make final scorecard of engagement? Anyone can answer that.
Sure, maybe if you may. So we prepare something called as the visit plan. Most pharma people would understand what I'm trying to say. It's more like a monthly visit plan. The typical pharma marketeer word that we use is a promotogram. So where you actually have, for A-class doctor, you have a visit 1, visit 2, visit 3. Generally, a B-class doctor, you have a visit 1 and visit 2, and a C-class visit 1. So when you look at that, and from that standpoint, today, I think the balance we are trying to find is at least one call or one visit in a month is face-to-face. And in some instances, if the doctor is giving us 2 calls, it is 2 calls face-to-face, and the remaining 2 are digital. So we are trying to find a balance between a 60-40 mix to a 50-50 mix. That's where we are today.
Right. Right, sir. Thank you for that. The next one is, how important is it to revisit the segmentation and targeting of HCPs with respect to their digital behavior? Do you suggest this to be done through in-house or to hire third-party expertise? That's a good one.
Can I take this, or Karthik, you want to?
Yeah, Salil, please go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So I think, how important is it to revisit the segmentation and targeting of HCPs? I think cannot be understated, right? It is extremely important. And like I said, changes in customer behavior have been manifold, driven by a lot of changes in the macro environment. So the way that they engage with pharma, the way that they engage with all the other stakeholders, etc., have clearly changed their behavior, and I think all of that needs to be a part of the segmentation and targeting. Unfortunately, pharma segmentation and targeting is more based on speciality, and or maybe a sub-segment will be geography, a further sub-segment will be practice size, another sub-segment will be consulting fees and all of that. This basically doesn't tell you where they are on their adoption funnel. So where they are in terms of understanding the molecules or their beliefs. So what do you actually shift? So the microeconomic behavior, the psychographic profiling of those doctors is extremely important. And I think understanding how they respond to digital touch points is going to be really, really important. Now, who would do this? I would prefer to do it in-house. but do I have the expertise to do it? Now, if I don't collect data, if I don't have enough digital assets that are streaming information back to me, and I have no ways in which I can actually build analytical capabilities, then I don't have the capability of doing it in-house. Ideally, I would like to do it in-house because a third party will have their own biases, they will not understand what to do, they will merely look at the data and not get the experience part of it in. So what happens is that there's a lot of opportunity to shoot holes in what the third party brings to you. And we are victims of confirmation bias, right? We will look at data in a way which will confirm our own biases and not really think about it from an open mind and say, oh, really, is this the way that customers have actually changed? Because we feel that we know, right? I've been in this industry for 30 years. How can somebody tell me that what I did for 30 years is now irrelevant? So there's always the pros and cons. So if you have the capabilities, do it yourself. If you can't, then you have no other option but to outsource it.
Very rightly said, sir. I think that's rightly said. And there is I would say, Salil sir, this question is for you. The person has specifically asked to you, and it's linked to what you have just said. She has asked, nowadays, doctor doesn't open webinar links also. What will be the marketing strategies digitally to engage more doctors?
The marketing strategy doesn't change. Right. Whether it is digital or it is physical or it is phygital or it is anything else, marketing stays the same. Right. So how would you engage with your customer? You cannot engage with your customer unless you know what is relevant to that customer. And if you go with, it's not your understanding of relevance, it is their understanding of relevance. So you have to start with the customer. And if you do not think about the customer as being relevant, or I generally talk about the 3C framework, the context, content, and channel. Generally, what we must do is to understand what the doctor understands, and therefore he sets the context to the conversation. And then when you create content from that context, then the content becomes most relevant for that doctor. And then once you've got the right content, then you think about what channel to use. The content is best distributed over multiple channels, and so different channels support different kinds of content. And how do you know what to do where? That is what the context tells you. The customer will tell you. Unfortunately for us, we do it in the reverse order. For us, when I say us, is pharma, right? So I did an international speaker program, right? So I had 3 hours of content. I broke that down into 20 or 12 videos. Okay, now I'm going to send one video every month. So I got a full calendar of promotional activity to send. Who's interested in something that happened in January if you send it in March or April or November or something like that, right? So don't think about what content you have and then build your strategy. So from that perspective, I think it is important for us to keep in mind what the customer wants and give him him or her what he is asking for. And if you keep doing that again and again, and I'm not saying you will get 100% success rate every time, but you have to keep on curating, you have to keep on iterating, and that's what will get your customer to open. You send a webinar, you send an email, you send anything, that's the reason why he will open your any of your digital outreach.
Maybe I can just add more to what Salil just mentioned. And this is again one of the marketing strategies, I would say, which typically may not exist on a marketing strategy earlier. We engaged with a digital tech, health tech organization who actually helps build digital footprint for physicians. As you know, there are still a lot of physicians that do not have their own digital microsite, that don't have a Twitter handle of their own, they don't have a good LinkedIn profile of their own. And there are professional organizations and agencies that work with doctors to build their customized profile. And it has led to significant outcomes in terms of referrals, in terms of the speaker invites they get, multiple outcomes that emanate out of that. So what we did is we did something called as a digital masterclass for doctors. And we had 2 versions of it. One version was delivered, the content of that digital masterclass is more of a digital orientation program of sorts for doctors. One version was tailor-made for doctors. What we also did is we structured another program called Digital Masterclass for hospital marketeers. So what we did is we had our marketing teams to collaborate with the hospital marketing team to develop demand generation or footfall development techniques or methodologies, which is key to hospital operations and hospital revenue growth. Because that is what we realized is most corporate hospitals that we work with had as a inherent need. And therefore we said a digital masterclass for HCP to meet the HCPs requirements or needs, and a digital masterclass for the hospital operations and hospital marketeers. And that worked really well. And the customer saw us in a different light as a partner there. So there are multiple such opportunities that exist. Yeah.
This is such an interesting talk, and I don't think so that I would like to end this, but looking at the time, and we have a lot of questions though, but looking at the shortage of the time that we have now, I think we have to stop it here, but I know nobody wants to leave, but to the one who have asked the questions, we'll try to get back to you with the answers that you have asked, and I'll try my level best on that. And I think we have come to the end. I'm sorry for those whose question we couldn't take, but I think this has been a very interesting talk for me personally, because I have learned a lot of, I have taken a lot of learnings from the distinguished speakers that we have amongst us today. So I think with that, we come to an end. And before we wrap up, Dr. Karthik and Mr. Salil, thank you so much for your time and all the people who have joined us today. And a very special thanks goes to Pharma State Academy for co-organizing this webinar with us. Thank you, Dr. Swati and Dr. Satish, for doing that. So Taylor and Francis, as I said, this is a series, and you must have seen on the website as well. And this was just the kicking off for this particular series, but there is more to come. The next session is planned on the 17th of December on supporting HCPs in their journey of publishing through the open access digital platform. So in case you haven't registered for that, I would encourage you to register the same. And Swati, if you'd like to say anything, the closing remarks.
Thank you, Sonali, for your kind words, and thank you, Dr. Karthik and Salil sir, for wonderful conversation here. I believe firmly that all the pharma marketeers, sales and marketing teams, medical teams, the company heads would be listening to this, that how digital engagements are changing, how newer approaches could be built up. And for that matter only, we collaborated with Taylor and Francis Group and their team to bring in these solutions, to give them a hint where to start, what more to start. This is not like that you have to incorporate each and everything in your strategy, but it is one thing that you can incorporate in your strategy to build up your HCPs. So thank you, Dr. Karthik, for joining us. Thank you, Salil sir, for joining us. Thank you, team from Taylor and Francis Group. Thank you, Sonali. Thank you, Pushkar. And thank you all the participants. We really appreciate your questions, and we will be answering your questions. We have those with us. We will try to answer those one-on-one. Please join us on the second session in this series. And as Sonali mentioned, it will be delving deeper into the same topic. So do not miss that session. We go deeper and deeper and see what more benefits could be there from publishing side of this healthcare business. Thank you all for joining us. This is all from our side, Pharma State Academy. Thanks all of you in our journey, in your journey. We all are part of it. Keep learning. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good evening.